This episode of the Jiu-Jitsu Times podcast is brought to you in part by No Judges Needed BJJ Apparel and Lavender Lane CBD products. You can use the promo code JJT for 20% off your first order at No Judges Needed, and the code JJTimes20, all uppercase. Last two items are numerical for 20% off your first order of CBD products. Thank you very much for sticking with us. Enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Jiu-Jitsu Times podcast. My name is Kevin Gallagher. I am flying solo today because my Oxford-educated partner, Kevin Bradley, is MIA, doing some other work for himself. So I get to run the show by myself today. So please don't expect much in terms of lines of production value. I'm going to do my best to get through this thing and get right to the root of the matter. But today we have a very special guest, someone that's a good friend of mine that's in the Central Florida area that I've met quite a few times and trained with before. I don't think we've ever trained before, but I've met you before. We've been on some competition days together before. Mr. Jim Alers. He is a former UFC fighter. He is a current bare knuckle boxing champion, and he's a very avid Vagner Rocha black belt that competes quite often on the jiu-jitsu circuit. So thank you very much for coming in while you're getting massaged like the true celebrity that you are. Get to do the interview for me. Thanks for giving us your time, man.
Oh man, for sure. I just I just forget things all the time, and of course, I can book myself.
You're good, man. We can knock this thing right out, brother. I kind of like this. I feel like I'm talking to like somebody major, man.
I feel comfortable here.
Hey, bro, as long as you can still talk, as long as your brain is still functioning, we'll be able to get some information out of you, man. So what's going on, man? How's life? What have you been up to, man? You got anything coming up for the bare knuckle boxing? I know you got a fight you're trying to put together. I saw somebody was kind of
man. So yeah, I was supposed to fight a few weeks ago actually, but my boxing coach ended up getting COVID, and it's not like MMA. I don't have 20 other coaches. I have one boxing coach that I work with, that I've been working with since I started bare knuckle. It's not like you can just pick up the yellow pages and find a bare knuckle boxing coach.
Right.
So I couldn't work with him. So right there, I only had 4 weeks notice for the fight. It was supposed to be for the title finally, and I ended up having to pull out. They give the title shot to someone else. So now it's this whole big deal that I just don't believe that he's a champ in my eyes. I think in many people's eyes, this guy's not the champ. He has two fights in bare knuckle where everyone knows that he needs to beat me to become the champ. So it's been this whole thing right now. So hopefully him and I get to go at it. Luis Palomino, he's a big guy in Florida. South Florida's been around for a long time.
Name sounds familiar.
Yeah, he was an XFN champ. I know that was around Tampa for a while. But so him and I should be going at it for the title soon. But other than that, man, I've just been training, man, trying to stay active myself.
That's cool, man. That's cool. So tell me a little bit. You mentioned about having a hard time, or just not a lot of bare knuckle boxing coaches available for you to work with. Tell me a little bit about some of the strategical differences and some of the stylistic differences, in particular in your training and in your strategy, when you go into a bare knuckle boxing match as opposed to a regular boxing match or an MMA fight.
Yeah, so I feel like the way I go in is a style that I used to have in MMA. In MMA, if you watch some of my earlier fights, my stand-up was not great. I was just honestly a wrestler who had some jiu-jitsu, and I was just tougher than a lot of people. And
right.
I would just come at you, though, and I would barrage you with just many punches just so I could take you down, But now I've put technique in that, and I feel that's the style that I want to bring to. I wish if I could bring it to MMA, I would bring it to them. Where now I have better technique, and I'm just throwing with a lot of volume. And in regular boxing, it's easy to just put your gloves up and block, but with no gloves on, if you're coming from so many different angles, it's very hard to stop that. And that's just what I've been doing, is making sure that my cardio is just insane, that I can just go these 2 minutes nonstop. They're only 2 minute rounds. So I'm just going nonstop, not even sitting down in between rounds. because I just want to keep my heart rate up there, and I'm
Keep
just
that
going.
momentum flowing. Do you in terms of your punching? So you talked a lot about the idea of throwing volume as opposed to I guess more power shots. Is there a strategy that involved with the idea of the fragile nature of your hands sometimes that you have to pull a little power off the punches just because you're worried about harming your hands because you don't have gloves on?
Yeah, I think as I go on, this is a learning process for probably everybody right now in the bare knuckle circuit, trying to figure out what works. My first fight, I went in there, knocked the guy out in 40 something seconds. The second fight, I go in there and now I go through the first round, don't knock him out, and knock him out in the second round. My hands, I start to feel, at the end of each fight, is a little bit more swollen than the other. So I do believe just more, I throw more jabs now, jab, 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 boom, power. Just trying to keep that hand out there, not throwing too much, but only when it opens up.
Right. Yeah, it's in particular. I think just my opinion. When you're talking about not wearing gloves, just like you said, the ability for you to defend yourself is way less. It's MMA is one thing, and then you get boxing because you got the big gloves on, where they're almost as important for defense as they are for actually striking.
Right.
And then secondly, you go to MMA where the gloves are a little bit smaller, but they're still there. And then you go down to no gloves, where it's literally there's nothing to defend yourself with.
Yeah, I believe that the gloves in MMA aren't really to defend yourself from punches, but more just to protect your hands.
Yeah,
from when you're punching. That's really, I feel, what they're there for.
Do you work in curious, for your head movement type principles? I got a little boxing background too, so I teach boxing. I know a thing or two about boxing and the strategy and stuff behind it.
Probably know more than I do, man.
I bet too, yeah, man. Ain't nobody punching me in the fucking face for a living, so you get the real deal.
Yeah, fight.
Right. Do you implement more like of a head movement type position for your or strategy for your defensive purposes simply because you can't block?
Yeah, my go-to, when I was thinking about who would have a great style for bare knuckle, I was just thinking Mike Tyson, like covering up, coming in, bobbing and weaving the whole time, and then just coming at just these angles, trying to get people. I utilize the clinch a lot more. Obviously, you can't clinch in boxing, but that's just as my way of throwing how he threw those power hooks. I clinch up and I just uppercut, body, head, use that. I use my wrestling a lot, man. Yeah, I train wrestling still multiple times for these bare knuckle boxing fights because I really feel like Greco work and clinch work is big in it, and I use it and I tire people out with it.
Yeah, that's interesting too. And that's another thing that George Foreman was famous for that. Like when he came back and fought in his later years, like he would just hang on people. Ali did it really well too. Just tire them out. Just make them carry your weight, hang on their head. So now, instead of thinking about trying to punch, you're thinking about getting this guy off of me. And now, when you include the addition of being able to return fire with those clinches, that clinch work has a double edge. You can tire somebody out. You can also clip them in the face while you're holding there and get some good power off of the shots. So let's talk a little bit about your time in the UFC, man. So you fought in the UFC about 3-4 years ago, I think it was.
Yeah, man, it's already been 4 years, I believe.
Wow, man, that's crazy. That's crazy, man. How do you feel like that work in the UFC has progressed your insights and progressed your confidence to be able to perform well at other events? And I say that in this regard, like when you make it to the big show, you did something. And I don't care what anyone else to say. If you can fight in Bellator, you can fight in ONE, you can fight in all these other organizations, these little local organizations, become a champ in one of them. But you never really do anything. I don't mean anything, but you've never really made it until you make it to the big show. And the UFC is the big show. Do you feel like getting to that point has boosted your confidence to the level to believe that you can accomplish it? There's almost like an arrogance or a chip on your shoulder that comes from that?
Man, yeah, I think when I remember coming up, and most of the people that I've saw get into the UFC, especially from like around my area. They got in through The Ultimate Fighter or something like that, and it was crazy because I feel like I was one of the first people to get in like the Central Florida area that actually had to like. I was 13-1 with 11 finishes, I believe, before I got into
you had to earn that shit. You didn't just get you didn't go on a TV show.
And yeah, I had to really like get myself into that, and it was tough. But I realized I feel like I fought and been around the world. I've done so much that now when I go compete in jiu-jitsu, or it's fun now to me. You know, the pressure's gone, and I'm just like, all right, now it's time to just have a good time. This is what I worked so hard for, that I don't care if I win or lose, you know. But I want to have a good time, and because of having that attitude, I think it's gotten me so much further in my career that way. Just the wins start coming now when you're just more confident in yourself.
Yeah, man, it's a weird thing, man. Like it's hard to explain to young fighters, because I believe that I have somewhat of that idea myself. Again, I never made it to UFC, but I've done some pretty cool things in the world of jiu-jitsu that allow me to have the confidence to believe that I can hang with the big boys. You know what I'm talking about? I'm a little bit old and I ain't got as much as I used to, blah, 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 blah. But I believe that I could go out on the mat and hang with anyone they put in front of me. And the reason I believe that is because I put in the work and I broke through to that next level, and I've been on them big stages well enough to give myself the confidence to be able to believe that I can be there. And it's very difficult for me sometimes to explain to young fighters that idea. They're like, oh man, I want to do this, I want to do that. And I just look at them in their eyes, and you can just tell that they don't really get it because they're still afraid. And you don't get it until you get there and you get it. You don't understand what it's like to be that guy until you get there and you are that guy.
Yeah, I think, and just doing that is just being active, you know, just trying to, whatever chance you get to compete. I know nowadays it's like everyone wants to do a super fight. I mean, it's not a super fight, they don't want to do it almost. People don't want to pay to compete in jiu-jitsu anymore. And I got to that point. I remember when I was in the UFC, I was like, oh man, you know, I'm in the UFC now. I shouldn't have to pay to compete in this. And I realized, man, I stopped competing. I was only fighting my one UFC fight every year or something like that, because you know, you don't get to fight too much when you get there unless you're just a hot thing. But so I like stopped competing, and now I'm trying to compete in everything I can, you know, and super fight or not, tournament, I'm just trying to stay active. And I think that just gives you that confidence, win or lose. Okay, I just, you know, it's just become second nature to you to compete and be on the mats.
Yeah, man. You know, I'm a little old school myself in this respect, and I think of a lot of times of the new world in which we live in terms of social media and building your persona and your presence, and you know, your status before you've actually done any work. What do you think about that, man? I you know, and I mean that again in saying, like, I see so many guys and so many young, particularly like jiu-jitsu fighters or MMA fighters that are out there trying to make their big name and blowing themselves up on Instagram and blowing themselves up trying to get sponsors, and are pissed off that they're not getting paid big money for fights and things like that. And I look at them and I tell them, well, like, bro, like, I don't care how many Instagram followers you have. Like, dude, you haven't done anything yet. You haven't won anything yet. You haven't gone out there and proved yourself. And like, how does that relate to you?
No, I mean, I tell people that all the time. You know, it's very weird when like these guys, they're super excited about their 15-0 amateur record, and I'm like, man, when I started, we didn't have amateur. I had to learn on the go. I had to go pro right then and there, you know. And I'm like, you know, you can go 20-0 amateur, but guess what? As soon as you go pro, you're gonna make the same as the other guy who went 0-5 amateur. It's right now the amateur circuit in MMA isn't as prestigious as boxing per se, you know. So I see these guys, they're showing up like amateur belts and everything, like they're legit world champions. But I guess that's just getting humbled, I guess, you know. It'll take them going into the cage and realizing, oh shit, I really haven't done anything yet.
We'll get in there against someone that's actually, you know, not just some amateur kid that probably shouldn't be in there in the first place. Yeah.
Doing it for the brand.
I see that all the time, and it's one of my biggest pet peeves. And again, like, I'm not just even talking about in MMA and in jiu-jitsu. I'm talking about, like, I'm old, man. I'm talking about coming up old in the old professional boxing circuits. And I would always say to myself, like, you watch these young guys and they go out and they win, 2 or 3 pro fights, or they get a shot on ESPN or something like that, and like immediately they turn into this larger than life personality. And normally across, and there's exceptions to this obviously, but normally across the board, that is just the recipe for disaster. It's like, bro, like, don't forget, like, you don't forget the work you put in to get to this point, and now think you just have it all coming to you because you're here and you're this godly figure, man. That's the killer of more young fighters than I think I've ever seen.
Oh, too many times. Then they leave their coaches.
Yeah.
They, and then it's just like we're all of a sudden they're on a downfall, and they're like, what happened,
Yeah.
But
fighters don't get things, man. And as a coach, it's one of the hardest things for me to kind of. It's like being a parent, you know what I mean? Like, you get your kid, they start to grow up, and like, you're telling them all these things because I've been there, I've done all this dumb shit, I made all these mistakes, but they're not going to learn it until they learn it.
That's where I try to help them the most as a coach, is just like, listen, these are the things that I did that I really feel you shouldn't do. Like,
right.
let's go this better route. Believe me, I've done it all. I've been in it for a long time now. I can say that I'm like one of those OG guys now, been in the game for a while. But you always have them. But I think the only way they can learn, I guess, is going through the fire and then realizing that they made the mistake.
Yeah, man, it's true, man. Even teaching like technical things, like I'm even if you're thinking about stuff like a jiu-jitsu practitioner, like you get a blue belt, right? And you're teaching this blue belt, and you're trying to tell them, hey, man, don't do that. This isn't going to work, and they just look at you and they do whatever they want to do anyway, and you're like, all right, whatever. And then like a year from then or 2 years from now, when they're doing the thing that you told them to do, you actually showed them to do, and like they realize that it works, and they still don't even realize that, hey, man, it's like they kind of discovered what they found on their own. And in reality, I've been trying to shove it in their face the entire time. Exactly. But coaching, again, is one of the most thankless freaking. You almost have to be like a proud father that just kind of shakes his head and goes, man, you know what? I did that. Even if he doesn't know I did that, I had a little part in that.
Yeah, that's the only thing you really can do.
So let's talk a little bit about your jiu-jitsu, because I know I've been following you on Facebook and Instagram and your social media, and you've been looking pretty actively to get any competitions you can under your belt, just to try to stay active, because you like to keep motivated, particularly now in this COVID time when it's hard to find things to do. So do you have any jiu-jitsu matches or any jiu-jitsu super fights or anything you're trying to get involved in to make something like that happen for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the 30th, I just got booked for one against Jose Caceres. I think it's going to be down here. I think it's called Combat Grappling, a new organization.
Yeah.
I think Gilbert Burns and Hebert Burns are putting it down.
Yeah.
That should be a fun match down here. But man, I'm just trying to really stay active. Before I got into MMA, actually, I was like really into jiu-jitsu. My original goal was be a jiu-jitsu world champ, And as a purple belt, I went to Abu Dhabi. I won the Abu Dhabi trials, and then I found MMA and just kind of stopped, and kind of got out of the jiu-jitsu circuit for a long time. I came back and everyone's playing footsies, so I had to just kind of relearn a lot of stuff. And in the beginning, I would get caught here and there in a heel hook, and it just motivated me to keep pushing, learn more. And now I feel I have good defense, a good offense. I've won a match or two even with heel hooks, and I just want to get going. I want to compete at these bigger events. So if anyone's watching, man, I'm here. I'm ready. Let's get going.
Hopefully we can get you a little bit of exposure. Not that you would need exposure. I mean, you're a pretty damn big name. I don't see why promoters wouldn't be knocking your door down to put you on a big major event. But let's maybe we can get some things. I may have a little insight for you here or there to get you on a few cards. I'll see what I can do for an old friend of the show. But do you find that sometimes competing in a jiu-jitsu match is a bit of an emotional letdown in regard that, you know, when you're doing MMA or you're doing jiu-jitsu, there's a real chance of like serious harm for you. You know, you've got a hard road to run when you're doing a jiu-jitsu or an MMA match or a bare knuckle boxing match. Do you feel like you don't get the same kind of rush or high from going back down to a jiu-jitsu match?
No, man, I still have a good time in there. You know, my goal is to go in there and get the finish. And when I don't, you know, then I get kind of upset about it. Same thing I would in a fight. So it's all the same to me. Combat jiu-jitsu, MMA, bare knuckle, arm wrestling, thumb wrestling. That competitiveness is what I'm looking for.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you on that regard, man. Like if you're a competitor and you're trying to get better in any means, learning how to compete is a particular skill set no matter what you do. And I don't care if you're playing checkers, you're playing freaking basketball, you're fighting in a cage. Like, you get better at learning how to win, and that's a skill set that carries you through to the next level.
Right. I need to make that feeling just ordinary. You know, I don't want it to feel out of the normal to get the way I want. Hey, this is what I expect every time out of myself. If it doesn't happen, that's just it sucks for that moment. But hey, I'm coming back harder no matter what it is, and I'm gonna figure out a way to win.
Did you so let's talk a little. You talked a little bit about taking a little hiatus from the competitive jiu-jitsu scene and focusing more on your MMA, and then coming back and trying to deal with the new leg locks and all the other things that are developing from that game. How do you feel about coming from obviously, I know you're a Vagner Rocha black belt, you're a fight sports guy, and they're definitely toe the line of that more traditional pressure, you know, old school advanced position type jiu-jitsu game. How do you feel like, or what are your thoughts on the modern style versus the old school style?
So in the beginning, you know, I was all like, oh man, you're attacking my feet. That's cheap, you know? And I think it took a lot of just convincing of just me training it, you know, and realizing that it was more of a fear. But so I've had 2 ACL surgeries because of heel hooks, ACL meniscus surgeries, because I wasn't aware. You know, I didn't understand it, and because I was uneducated, I hurt myself. And I think coming back, and especially everyone doing it, and I'm just tapping right away, and they're like, "Oh, I barely had it," and I'm like, "Oh, I don't want to risk it." It made me feel like dumb in a way, you know, like, "Oh man, why don't you just take the time to learn this?" And it was hard because it's almost like I don't even call what I do anymore jiu-jitsu. I grapple. You know, we're doing a mixture of so many different things. And, you know, so it was hard to like kind of relearn again, but, I like it, man. I think it's more exciting, more ways to finish. I guess I would stop doing it before because I didn't feel like it benefit me for MMA. I didn't like being in the bottom, going for foot locks. I felt like I could get punched in the face or something, but I mean, Ryan Hall's doing it awesome in MMA. So it could happen for sure.
Yeah, Calvin Gasson just got finished with a heel hook.
Yeah.
The other night, he did a horrible job of escaping that heel hook. By the way, oh my god,
I mean, it's crazy because you see that the low level.
Yeah.
That some of these, I think, and that's what got me through MMA too. A lot of times, that my jiu-jitsu level was just a lot higher than a lot of these guys. They're good in jiu-jitsu, some of them, a lot of them, but it's more like anti-jiu-jitsu. And if they get put in something that they haven't seen before, they're like, "What is this?" You know, and that's when they get caught.
Jiu-jitsu just has a particular ability to make you think in so many different directions and so many different strategical manners when you're fighting. And I don't think there's anything else in the arts of MMA that really puts you in that psychological level. Like getting your black belt in jiu-jitsu is such a trial and it changes you in so many ways and challenges you in so many ways physically. And more importantly, psychologically. And I don't think there's any other tool that gets you more prepared. Not like I say, I think wrestling's, one of the more valuable techniques, and obviously you got to learn how to strike, but jiu-jitsu just gets your mental game stronger than any of those other arts.
Oh yeah, after wrestling, when I found jiu-jitsu, I was just like, man, this is like wrestling 2.0. It's like I can wrestle, and all those potentially dangerous moves that I couldn't do before, I can do now. I love this shit.
That's cool, man. Did you find it difficult to start to incorporate the philosophies of leg locks? Because I saw you go for a heel hook down in Substar, so I know your things about your heel hooks. You almost finished that kid. But like, did you find it difficult to kind of rewire your brain after already getting your black belt to start to think about how to incorporate the leg locks and their lower after games into your overall strategy?
Yeah, especially, I mean, a lot of my jiu-jitsu I used to do was in the gi mostly too. So it was I would do like gi jiu-jitsu, but fight MMA. Like barely train no gi ever. Only time I trained no gi is when I was doing MMA. So it was really weird, like this even like being like, oh, I can attack. I've been missing out. I would have down here say like on 50% of the body, So I was like, man, I only knew half of this jiu-jitsu. I'm like, I'm not a black belt. In my mind, I was like, I'm not a black belt. How can I say that I'm a black belt if I only know how to attack the top part of the body? So I was just like, man, I got to learn. I remember, and then Vagner would put me in them. And I'm like, tap. He's like, no, man, I'm not tapping. Figure out how to get out. He wouldn't crank it. Those are the best people to train with. Yeah. Your coach is not going to break your leg. And if they do, you have a shitty coach.
I don't know. Right? Vagner kind of scares me a little bit. I've rolled with Vagner before, man.
Believe me, man. I'm scared a lot of times, but he takes care of me, man. And he helped me out a long way, man. Just because he'll hold it in there, and I'm like, he's like, nah, man, just figure it out. He's like, there's a way out. Figure it out. I'm not gonna crank it. And I'm like, all right. So we'd slow things down, and then boom, speed it back up. So he definitely helped me. Everyone over there, man, they're getting good at it. Vagner, he's like crazy hard to submit with the heel hooks. That's what he's like the kryptonite to some of these guys.
Do you think I watch a lot of competitive jiu-jitsu. Sometimes I want to stick a freaking pin in my eyeball, but I watch a lot of competitive jiu-jitsu. In particular, I talk about some of the up and comer guys that, unlike yourself and myself, didn't have to kind of relearn leg locks. Like I didn't start doing leg locks until like deep into my brown belt. You know what I mean? I didn't, and based upon that, I had already had a predetermined strategical philosophy towards my jiu-jitsu game that I had to rewire, because now when you're doing leg locks, these leg locks enter into sweeps and other things and defenses, and they chain together in a completely different manner. And first of all, you still got to learn how to freaking do the damn things,
right?
But you see these young guys and we could talk about the same philosophy in that regard to points matches, to points grapplers versus submission only grapplers. Like there used to be that time, like where you were submission only grappler, you were points grappler. What you notice now, and particularly some of the young guys that are the future of the sport, is that they have become complete grapplers, because they started in an era when both of those things were prevalent, with the points matches and the submission only matches and the leg locks. So what you're seeing is guys that now attack for submissions, but are also still very aware of understanding how to maintain positional awareness of jiu-jitsu and winning takedowns and things like that. What do you think about that? That's a big long question, but I don't even fucking tell me what you think.
Man, I think this new genre of kids coming up, that it's so awesome to see. I mean, I'm very pro America and everything, so it's very cool to see these Americans. Not that I have anything against Brazilians or anything, but they've run this sport for so many years, and it's kind of cool to see. I mean, jiu-jitsu really started becoming big in the United States, like in the early 2000s. It was around, but it started becoming big, around then. And it's cool to see these kids when I first started jiu-jitsu back then, like that were kids, now are amazing, where they know a little bit of everything. They realize like, hey man, I should wrestle in high school also. And so they have that. They've been doing jiu-jitsu since they were 5 years old. And it's just amazing to see them as just like blossoming and taking over the sport. I love every time I see an American world champion, I'm just like, man, hell yes. We're coming up, and it just shows the evolution of the sport more than anything.
So here's another question on that same vein. I'm always just curious about people's interpretations of this. Do you believe that the modern style takes away from the self-defense martial arts aspects of jiu-jitsu? Because a lot of old heads will jump on that boat.
Man, so sometimes I go back and look at these those old school self-defense things, and I'm like, that crap's not gonna work on anybody. But maybe it's because like my mind is just way more advanced. Maybe it will work on somebody who doesn't know anything. I don't know. But I think it doesn't. I think it's still it just, there's always a way to go. You're going for the kill still. You're going for those submissions, to put people in positions that make them uncomfortable. And I think it's still the same. I mean, would I pull guard in a street fight or anything? Probably not. But if I fell on the ground, I've seen it one time, a basketball game. Someone like put a heel hook on somebody, almost broke his leg.
Yeah,
so right. I mean, it works, man. It works.
Yeah, I agree with you that too. And like, I always use an example is like, we have to come up with these new and creative and innovative ways to try to trick each other, because both of us know jiu-jitsu. Like, we both know like jiu-jitsu at a very high level. So when you see competitive jiu-jitsu and competition jiu-jitsu, those guys are training at a different level where they have to do creative and new things to trick each other in order for them to work. Like when you're in a street fight against a civilian, like you're not going to have to go down that far down the well. It's going to be, I'm grabbing you, putting you on the ground, taking them out or taking your back and putting you to sleep, and you don't even know what happened. It's like having a superpower.
Right. I mean, definitely when, I used to work at the bars and stuff back in Orlando for a few years and everything. And that stuff, the little bit that you need to know that you can use to hold someone down, or it's like, man, this is why police need to train. Yeah. I think, get to blue belt level. I think it should be a mandatory right there. And then you got it.
Yeah, I watched so many of these videos, and I wrote articles about this. I've had cops on and talked about it too. I've watched so many of those videos where, the guy at the gas station at the Wendy, like two grown cops. Like, I mean, I'm thinking to myself,
like, how did this happen?
How did that happen? Like, why it wouldn't have to revert that far down the line? Like, I've got 14-year-old kids that train at my gym that could have subdued that guy on their own.
It's crazy.
It's crazy to see how horrible these guys are trained, that they have to resort to situations where now they're in life or death and they're concerned for their safety. Whatever. I don't want to get into that debate. It's a tough job being a police officer. I know some of them are pricks and some of them do the right things, but unfortunately, if they were better trained, I think we wouldn't be talking as much about guys getting shot, because we just
that's why. I mean, I definitely take my hat off to those that, I mean, we know some badass cops, high level black belts, and still put in the time to train and make sure that they're, in shape and ready in case shit does go down.
Right. So I wanted to ask another question to you, because you talked a little bit about how during your MMA career you trained almost exclusively in the gi. Like, you did a lot of gi training during your MMA career, and there's always this debate amongst particularly like my young fighters that come in and say, well, I don't have time to train in gi because it's worthless for my jiu-jitsu, because I want to fight MMA, or I'm going to fight no gi, so I'm not going to train the gi. I'm of the opinion that jiu-jitsu is jiu-jitsu. Like, if I'm training the gi, I'm training the no-gi, I'm still using my mind and manners of jiu-jitsu. Like, my gi game and my no-gi game are almost interchangeable in that regard at this point. Tell me what you think about gi training for MMA.
I mean, for me, it just felt, when I had a fight coming up, I'd love to do gi, and I would say, man, if I can get out of these moves where someone can literally grab me still for extra friction and everything, then it should be way easier in no gi. And that's how I would do. I would do the gi without grabbing their gi. I'll let them grab me, try to choke me and everything, but I would try to do it too without using it when I had fights. And I think it helped me so much. It's funny that every time sometimes I have kids that don't want to do gi, and they'll be like, oh, can I do no gi with you? And I'm like, yeah. And then I'm like, yeah, but you can't grab my gi though. and everyone grabs the gi. They can't help it. They can't help it.
Yeah, that's a tough one too. I agree with you in that a lot too, man. Like I think about gi and I think about no gi and I think about the idea of when you're training in the gi, just like you said, because guys can grab you because there's friction with the cloth. Like you have to learn to do things correctly, particularly in your escapes, particularly in your ability to get away from someone trying to do you harm. Because when you're in no gi, like, and again, I don't like to say that guys that train specifically no gi don't know jiu-jitsu or vice versa. I don't like to have that debate because I think if you know jiu-jitsu, you know jiu-jitsu. And I think if I took somebody in no gi and said, here, put this on, like if I took a high-level black belt and put it in gi, yeah,
there's still going to be a high-level black belt.
There'll be a slight adjustment, but they'll figure it out in no time.
Exactly.
But the idea is that, you know, when you're training in the gi, you're training to do things correctly because you can't use that athletic force and that athletic explosions to
too many times you can just muscle out of things in no gi.
Yeah.
You know, I do it.
Yeah, why not? You know, but the thing of it is like, you know, I'm an explosive big guy too, and I know I have it there, but I also like to learn to do things right. You can always know you got it in your back pocket. You always know, hey, if I have to, okay, cool, that's real sweet. Let me just check this out. But it's cool to learn to do things right. So let's move on, man. Let's talk a little bit about some more MMA stuff because I in particular, I want to talk about some fights coming up on the horizon that are particularly interesting. Maybe one big one, and I'd like to get your opinion on it because I know you'd have some good insights on it. What do you think about the potential of a Khabib Gaethje fight on the horizon?
Man, I think if there's anybody, people don't realize that Gaethje has pretty awesome wrestling too, right. and pretty good defense. You know, I don't think he's been taken down too many times in his career, and he's just dangerous. He's dangerous in that pocket that Khabib needs to get into. So if Khabib does take him down, and I think if he drags him past the second round, I think Khabib will probably continue to just dominate him, probably tire him out, use his weight on top of him. But I think Gaethje has this one. I think people have been starting to pay attention more and more on his style and just how to. That's all everyone's doing. Anybody who's a contender, they're training to beat Khabib. You know, so I mean, I like it. I love that he's dominating with wrestling. You know, I'm a wrestler at heart, but I don't know. I think Gaethje has this one. He was just ruthless in his last fight against Ferguson, man.
Brutalizer.
It was a beauty to see.
I'm surprised. Again, I was very surprised on several occasions that they didn't stop that fight sooner than they did. Like they gave Ferguson the champion's nod, but like, well, man, he took way more damage than he needed to take. He was just getting clobbered by.
How do you feel as a coach there? Now, you know, I have my school now for 2 years. I have, you know, some guys that have asked me that question, like, what would you have done? And I'm like, man, I would have stopped it. I'm sorry, man. I understand, but I do understand that, man, when you're not in it and you're done, you're done. There's not really
it was very clear that his fighter had that you know, Ferguson wasn't going to win the fight anymore. It was no longer capable of winning that fight. His heart was still telling him to go forward out of just blindness, but there was no power on his punches anymore. He was just taking unnecessary shot after unnecessary shot from someone that hits so hard.
I've told my corner, you know, especially being in bare knuckle now, I'm like, listen, I know myself. This is not like MMA. They're giving me 8 seconds to get up. I'm gonna get up every time.
Right.
I'm like, so if you see me like getting hurt, I put my trust in you guys. I have no like remorse if you end the fight for me. If you feel like it needs to be over.
Yeah, man. I can't express to you enough how important that is. And this is another reason why when I see referees take trash for stopping fights too early, I just say, you know what? So be it. And the reason being is because, you know, people that are on the outside looking in, they don't really realize the dangers involved. And sometimes fighters, when they're watching fights, you know what I mean? They get hyped up and they want to believe, just like you said, they've got their fighter's heart. But people don't realize that this is a sport where people can die. You know, this isn't football. This isn't soccer. This isn't basketball. You know, this is a war where people are throwing punches at each other's faces and kicks and strangles and looking to break arms and breaks necks. And the number one priority always have to be the safety of the fighters. And I think it's partly the referees, but it's also falls very heavily on coaches to make sure that they look in those guys' eyes to think they can still go and say, man, no,
you know you're a fighter. You know, you shouldn't have someone fighting if you don't know them like that, that you can look at them and know that they're done.
What do you think about now we're on this topic? Why not? We'll bring it back up again. What do you think? Are you familiar with the Drysdale incident, Robert Drysdale incident, when his fighter quit on the stool?
I feel like that could be a little bit different, you know, in the sense where I didn't watch the fight from what I was told, he wasn't like getting beat up or anything. I heard he was actually doing pretty good, and I think he was just trying to be like, man, you're tired, and it's all in your head on that one. So. That's a harder situation. That's more of the fighter giving up on himself.
He was still in the fight, like he's still, and it was the third round, and he wanted to quit on the bench. And I think he was the rounds were split, or in the idea of
when
close
to a close fight like that. I mean, unless he's telling me that he's hurt in some way,
or his eyes are freaking swelled shut, right.
I'm gonna be like, man, you're tired, man. And if you want to quit because you're tired, that's on you right now.
Right. Yeah, I think that's kind of what Drysdale was alluding towards. He wasn't saying, no, you're a bitch. He was saying, you know, look, dude, like, I don't think that this is the place that you can fit. And I'm telling you, as your coach and as someone that cares about you, knows about you, that in 6 months from now, 3 months from now, 2 weeks from now, you're going to regret quitting this fight because you could have won. And this is what you worked your ass on. This is what you're hard for.
And it happened. They cut him.
Yeah, exactly. And dude, Robert Drysdale is, you know, he's that guy's the gold standard, bro. And nobody's gonna tell me Robert Drysdale isn't doing the right thing and looking out for one of his fighters. When the whole thing went down, I was like, come on, man, this is really kind of silly. People just don't get it. People see a fighter says they want to quit, but they don't understand the nuanced, emotional, and as
soon as I saw that, I got messaged after me. What would you do? I'm like, I need to see the fight.
Yeah, you got to see it, right?
I'm like, I need to see the fight.
That's what I always say too. When people tell me, what about this? What would you do about this? Well, you know, I can't make a real decision on it because I didn't watch the fight. And I'm not even just saying watching like the little clip of the video. You got to watch the entirety, the whole thing to find out whatever, to get the general idea. Well, that's cool, man. You got a few more minutes? You want to keep talking? You got another 15, 20 minutes? Yeah, let's do this thing, man. I got a couple more things I've jotted down on my little creepy little notebook here.
Prepared.
Yeah, I wouldn't say prepared. more like a maniac, just scribbling and writing things down. Let's talk Mike Tyson, Roy Jones Jr. for a little bit, man. Let's talk about the expectations for the hype versus the reality of what you think might happen.
Man, I became a big Mike Tyson.
You're on the spot today, Bubba. I'm asking you the tough questions.
I became a big Mike Tyson fan. A couple of years ago, I read one of his books, and I was just like, man, this guy's had a crazy life, you know. And it's just kind of cool to see the turnaround that he's made in his life, you know, because he was really like on rock bottom, you know. And it's just cool to see him back and training. And I thought it was a joke, you know, in the beginning, like, oh man, I'm coming back. Or maybe I thought people were just making a big thing off to see him training. And I'm like, maybe he's just training to stay in shape, get back into doing something he loves, you know? But I don't know how excited I am about the fight, because I feel we all are going to think we're going to see this savage of Mike Tyson, but he said it himself.
Yeah, he said
that sometimes he cries and gets, because he knows that killer is not there anymore, and that's all he used to be.
That's funny, man. He pretty much flat out said that, you know, this is for charity. This is an opportunity, you know, to do something too little good.
I hope that it's I don't know. I don't know how an exhibition match will go. I know it's supposed to be like a glorified sparring match, but I mean, who's gonna let their ego let them take the loss on this one. So I don't know how.
Yes, and that's the thing. Like, it's still two world-class champions that don't want to lose. Now, I've read a few articles that talked about the rule set, and they're saying that the referees have been advised to not allow things to escalate. They're not supposed to be going for the knockout, which is odd because, like, think about the idea of Mike Tyson and really Roy Jones Jr. being points fighters. You know what I mean? Like, they're both knockout guys. That's
going to be interesting to see. I mean, I'll probably watch it still, though.
Oh, I'm still gonna watch. It's Mike Tyson. Of course, I'm gonna fucking watch it. I'll pay $70 for it.
Get me on that undercard.
Yeah, right. Exactly. No shit, man. Like, it's still Mike Tyson. It's still gonna draw a crowd. There's still gonna be people excited to watch it. There's still gonna be people that want to tune in to see what Iron Mike can do and what it's all about. And they still, in their mind, they still believe it's gonna be this massive event. But I just, in my heart of hearts, I really think I don't think it's sad because, again, it's Mike Tyson. Fucking A, bro. I'm going to see Mike Tyson in the fucking ring again.
It's crazy to me because I never even watched boxing. I never watched anything really. I grew up watching WWE, WWF at the time, and I think the most of Mike Tyson I saw was when he went in there and it won in a WWF match or something like that against Stone Cold or something. And I got into boxing more towards the end of my MMA career, just because I just wanted to branch out and do something else. I'm like, I want to have a boxing match one day. So I just started watching more boxing and everything, and it's crazy how much of a science it really is.
Yeah,
way different than MMA. Way different than MMA.
It really is, man. Like, it's like I teach boxing and I coach boxing, and I have gotten to the point where I don't even like to fucking teach it anymore. I miss teaching it simply because I have a good knowledge of the sport inside of me, and I would like to continue to pass that on to people because, like, I have something to offer. But it's so goddamn annoying, and you have to have such a special person that will want to really learn the beauty and the science and the what do they call it, the sweet science that is boxing.
That's just the crazy part, is just like the angles and stuff that you have in boxing that I'm like, man, that's repetition. But you got to think, like, maybe at one point we were like that with jiu-jitsu, but it's like, do I want to do that?
Well, the differences that I find between jiu-jitsu and boxing or this is that, like, jiu-jitsu is completely on another level of mental game.
Right.
But the idea of jiu-jitsu is there's such a large array or catalog, encyclopedia of new moves and positions that you have to learn that you don't ever get bored, because you can just say, I'll screw around with this for a little bit, come back to it, and move on to something else. The problem with boxing is there ain't a whole lot to it. There's 4 or 5 punches. There's some head movement and angles. Yeah. It's understanding how to have a true mastery of all of those things and incorporate them into your strategical approach throughout the long haul to figure out how to put the power and the weight of your punches that makes it more difficult, because people just think, I should have this down in 6 months. But think of how long it took you to get your purple belt, your black belt.
I what's crazy is that I started using when I went to Colorado, I visited Dwayne Ludwig's, and I really liked his style. And so I would use a lot of those in bare knuckle, his combos, because his combos are kind of long sometimes. Like, I'll throw kicks, but instead of the kicks, I'm just throwing the punches instead. And it just keeps me without volume. I'm like 2, 3, 2, 2, 2, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, and in my head while I'm throwing, and it just helps with the volume.
Yeah, that's interesting, man.
I think from what I've seen, most boxers in bare knuckle, they haven't been doing too well. It's different.
Yeah, it is. You're absolutely right, because it's a different game. It's a very, very different game. Polymonology, like when you start holding them and throwing punches, it's like, whoa, this is odd. What's happening? How come I can't just use my footwork and maneuver and slip around?
He lost to like a C-level fighter. Artem's
right
14 and 16 or something like that.
Right, exactly. So, and he got pulled up by Artem. Artem was freaking. Yeah, Artem's a beast, man. I like watching Artem. I like watching Artem fight. I like his style. He just has a really cool. He's got cool, quirky little head movement. And he throws those punches real fluidly. He kind of he melds together his defensive work with his offensive work in a very good manner. He gets hit a lot, but it's fun. It's fun to watch the way he ties it together. Anyway, man, I got one more question for you, because I remember having you on the Old Man Grappling Hour podcast, and we talked a little bit about this idea, and it was something that I thought was I don't want to say specific, but something that I kind of gave you kudos for, is maybe you can impart some wisdom on some other young fighters. It's, you figured out a way to do pretty well with your money throughout the course of your fight career. And we talked a little bit about how you were able to put money away and put yourself in a position to where, like, fighting was great, but you might not really even need to fight. You're just doing it because you love it. Obviously, money's money, when you get paid. But like, you were able to put yourself into a position to where you're not looking out of desperation to jump in the ring. You're doing it because you really love it. And that's one of the sadder things I think I see in fighters, because, the fighters, you maybe you make $100 grand, $200 grand a year, which, you think you're on top of the world when you're 25, 26 years old. And then, 5 years from then you're broke, because 200 grand really ain't that much money when you think about it. And they end up having to continue fighting longer than they need to because they keep getting paid. Give us some insights on some of the things that you can maybe give some advice to some young fighters in that regard.
For me, one of the biggest things I did was, I didn't rely on fight money even from the beginning. I always had a job that was like, okay, this is for my training. I can pay my bills. I didn't do a lot of extra things, because from the moment I started, like, getting into MMA, I was like, okay, I'm gonna be in the UFC, and I didn't have time for partying or anything like that, because I was like, I'm dedicated. Not everyone does that, yeah, I whatever. I didn't, it wasn't all the time, but the majority of the time I was just training. And so the money that I would win from my fights, I didn't blow. Too many times, like, you see that these guys win these fights, they have the after party, they're just blowing money. They're blowing money. Don't look at that money as bonus money. Look at it as, like, man, this is the time to put this away. Whether it's $500 at the beginning. I think my first fight I made $300. I don't remember, something ridiculous. But even then, I put that away. $300. You put it away. You make the right investments with it, the right movements. Right now, it's so easy to do stock and everything too. Back then, it was a lot harder. Talk to people. There's a lot of educated people out there, YouTube videos, to just learn and educate yourself on financial freedom, really, And I always, every time I had a fight, all right, this is extra money. I'm going to live off my everyday work money. That's what it's there for. Don't look at it as, man, I just got a big bonus. Let me spend it now. Let me go buy the car I don't need, or go to the club and get bottles. Too many times it happens, and we see so many of these guys. There's a lot of guys that have been big names, and they're, like you said, they're broke, man. They're broke now.
Yeah, I see it. Boxing in particular is one of the sadder things, and this is one of the things when I heard that Mike Tyson was coming back, I got sad, thinking to myself, "Oh, Mike, come on, bro, you don't need the money. We're going to get you in a big fight," and it's going to be sad to see you as a shell of the person that you were before. But you see it a lot with fighters that just, they need the money, and they don't really have any other life skills, and they have to just continue fighting, and they just look horrible, and you wouldn't remember them as the great warriors if they were not these guys that are just chasing a paycheck.
A lot of times you'll see guys that, man, this guy used to be a prospect, and
right.
Now they have like a 500 record, and they didn't think about anything else. Man, the same time I was fighting, I was going to school too. I was like, man, I'm gonna have a backup plan, because God forbid I get one of those. This is the sport that it's so easy to get an injury that just totally ends your career. So you need to think about all of that coming into a sport like this.
What do you think about? You talked about those guys that they were prospects that now have a 500 record that are still chasing that dream. Like, what do you think? When do you think is the time to have that tough discussion, that tough conversation, to realize, like, you're beating yourself up for something that's really not worth it anymore? And, like, it's okay to say, hey, you know what? I just, things didn't go my way. I didn't have what it took. I just can't make it to that next level, and I need to move on with my life.
Yeah, I think it's hard. I think people, I don't know, some people just like that being the spotlight for 15 minutes, even if they're getting beat up for 15 minutes. It's weird, but you know, I've known people like that, and I'm like, man, why do you keep fighting, man? They're just like, oh, I love those people. Really love it sometimes, you know, too. They just love it. They love. I'm sure they can't love losing and getting beat up, but I think they just love that 15 minutes of fame that they get, you know, whether it is winning or losing, I guess, you know.
That's funny. I never thought of it that way, but that's a good point.
I think they need to see other outlets that they can have, you know. I think, man, look, go compete in jiu-jitsu. I love that they're doing like these pro jiu-jitsu matches, you know, sometimes, and giving these guys opportunities to compete, you know, whether it is, you know, honestly, in a pro jiu-jitsu match, some of these guys are making the same as these pro MMA fighters at the regional levels, you know. So I mean, it's awesome that they get to do that now, at least.
And Wagner's doing pretty well, man, doing these big super fights, man. I talk to him all the time. He's like, I don't want to fight MMA anymore. I don't got to get punched in the face. I'm making money doing jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, and Wagner was like a fight away from getting back into the UFC again, too. And
yeah.
He was just like, you know what? Forget that. I don't need it.
Man, I can't tell you how much I love that guy, dude. That dude, every time I talk to him, every time I see him, he's just such an awesome dude, man. Just go all the time. He's one of them dudes just looks at you and he's like, I'm going to do this. And you're just like, that motherfucker's going to do what he says he's going to do. Well, Jim, man, I think I took enough of your time up, man. I appreciate you coming on, man. Like, this was a great interview, and you're a good cat, man. Like I said, I've interviewed you before on the Omen Grappling Hour, and I know you personally. I've met you quite a few times. We have some Facebook correspondence, and I just think you're more than just a great fighter. Like, you really have a good head on your shoulders, and you really like understand life at a worldly level. And I just think you're an awesome dude, bro. It's refreshing. I guess lots of fighters are always good dudes. It's just the kind of a thing, but it's refreshing to see someone that's kind of the complete package like yourself. It's just just a happy dude, happy warrior, likes to do what he does, man.
They're gonna make me blush, man. We gotta train. I gotta head over to Tampa, man. Tampa is a far drive, but
man.
But I'd love to come train for day.
Yeah, whenever you want, man. Whenever you want. You got anything you want to plug? Any sponsors? Anything you want to talk about?
Man, I got Healthy One. They hooked me up my supplements, try to keep me healthy. HydroLife water. Use that water at my gym. Use it every day. I became bougie. It's the only kind of water I drink nowadays. But and of course my gym, Alers Martial Arts, guys, located in West Pembroke Pines. Come check it out.
Cool, man. Well, yeah, man, once again, on our part, go check out No Judges Needed at nojudgesneeded.com. Get your apparel. You can use JJT, the promo code JJT, and get 25% off your first order. And other than that, man, I think we're going to call it a show. Jim, thank you so much. Jim the Beast Alers, UFC fighter, current bare knuckle boxing champion, and looking for some super fights in the jiu-jitsu world. So in the jiu-jitsu community, jiu-jitsu promoters, man. Get Jim on your damn card. He'll sell some tickets for you, man. He's promotable. Look at that dude. Look at that pretty face.
All right, brother. Thank you.
Yeah, man. I've been Kevin Gallagher. Next show, I'm sure we'll be back with the two of us, and you won't have to listen to me talk so much. You'll have a real professional to run things. But I think I did a pretty good job. I did all right, Jim. I got through this thing, right?
I like it.
There it is, man. The Jiu-Jitsu Times podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you next time, man.